Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment capital of the world. Over the next 3 days, the top 32 Magic Pro League players and 36 challengers will attempt to forge their path to victory. $750,000 is up for the taking. And so is a seat at the Magic the Gathering World Championship. The third Mythic Championship begins now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to hot and sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, where it is time to kick off Mythic Championship 3. It is the third of 7 Mythic Championships that will be taking place across the globe this year, culminating in the Magic the Gathering World Championship at the end of the season. Good morning, players. How are you? We have 68 of the best players from around the world, 32 of which are from the MPL. 36 are challengers who are trying to make their mark on the Mythic Champion circuit. Who will win? It's time to find out over the next 3 days. My name is Day9. I'll be your host, and let's kick this off by answering the question, what is the tournament format? How will they battle their way to day 3? It starts off with 68 players total, but only 64 of them will be playing on day 1. They'll be battling in Swiss rounds, 8 rounds for each player, 4 or more losses, and you're eliminated. 6 or more wins, and you are on to day 2. The 12 players that advance from day 1 join the 4 MPL division winners. That makes 16 players total who will battle in a 16-person double elimination bracket. The top 4 players from day 2 will advance to day 3, where they will all be placed in a brand new double elimination bracket, where they will battle for the chance to win $100,000 and an invite to the World Championship. Thank you, voiceover Day9. It's me, Flesh and Blood Day9, one of the coverage crew for this Mythic Championship. We have a fantastic group of talent who'll be bringing you all that play-by-play action, so let's meet them. First, let's say hi to Maria Bartholdi.
Hey, thank you so much, Day9. Yeah, take a look. There is the trophy. That's what our competitors will be fighting for this weekend. As Day9 said, 32 members of the MPL, the best of the best at the best game in the world. But 36 challengers are also in the room looking to take their crown this weekend. Let's meet some of them.
My name is Kai Budde, and I'm currently living in Malta in Europe.
I am Amy D'Amico. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts.
I am Emma Handy. I'm originally from Asheville, North Carolina.
I started playing Magic in 1995. Then I played professional until about 2005. And then I've pretty much been playing at least a tournament every year.
So generally speaking, I think of myself much more as someone who's good at analyzing Magic, more than necessarily someone who's known for their super tight technical play.
I generally love strategic games, and I enjoy card games specifically. Magic is the only game that really hooked me for over 20 years now.
I think Magic is the game that has the most variety. You are never playing the same game twice. Different than, say, a real-time strategy game. This is the text of the card is what decides what happens. There are set rules, and no matter what you do, the rules of the game take precedence.
Like, this is a tough tournament. There's like 68 players, all of them are good. A lot of them are really, really good. When I was playing professionally, I was always like one of the very best players. And in this tournament, I would say there's probably 30, 35, 40 players that are just clearly better than me right now. I'm here to try to win this. I mean, I know that I have only a very small chance to do so, but I mean...
I think that it's really fun to get to bring a little bit of variety into a competitive field, try and win with it, maybe pull off some crazy combos on the way.
I've won more of these big tournaments than anyone else in the room before, and I mean, why not this one?
I want to win. Simic secretly is pretty good right now. I'm not sure it'll be great every week, but I know Autumn got up to top 10 Mythic in like 2 days of play. I jumped a ton of ranks up. It's been really good for us so far, and I'm feeling like it's our tournament to lose, you know?
If I win, it would validate me as a fighting spirit.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the news desk here at Mythic Championship 3. Maria Bertholdi and Day 9 hanging out with you. Of course, Marshall Sutcliffe and Paul Cheon will be in the booth this weekend. They'll be coming up later, but I want to know, Day 9, what are you most looking forward to?
I gotta be honest, it's the weird shifts in the meta.
Yeah.
You know, just due to regular real-life traveling, I sort of got to play Magic, then a week of travel, then play a little Magic, another week of travel, and now I'm here. And the meta has shifted so much during each of those times. It was almost like coming back to a new game.
Miss it.
Yeah, and so there's a huge question mark about what really even is the strongest deck in the format right now, and I'm really excited to see what these players' answers is.
Yeah, super small field too, so unusual tournament structure here. Well, let's find out some players to watch from our first casters, Alias V and Cedric Phillips.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm Alias V alongside Cedric Phillips, and we have the pleasure of bringing you the very first game of this tournament. But before we do that, Cedric, I need to ask you, who's your player to watch?
So I have to pick, in our first time working together, you're making me pick one player out of the 68 players.
Yes, sir. It's easy. It's just like picking your favorite Magic card.
Oh, yeah, that's super easy. There aren't many of those. So if I have to pick one, I'm going to pick one who is very similar to myself. And so far as one, we both like white-based aggressive strategies. And two, we got very lucky to beat Luis Scott Vargas in various tournaments. That's, of course, Andrew Ellenbogen, your Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica champion. He is playing Boros this weekend. He likes white-based aggressive strategies, somehow maybe even more than me, which I wasn't sure was entirely possible. A big fan of Splash Experimental Frenzy. Ellenbogen won that Pro Tour by beating LSV in the finals. Who knows if they're going to clash again this weekend. I think that would be very fun if they did. But look, I think that Boros is a very good deck on the weekend. White-based aggressive strategies are doing very, very well in Magic Arena right now, climbing up the Mythic ladder. And who better to play this strategy than one that has actually already won a Pro Tour very recently with it in Andrew Ellenbogen.
All right, for myself personally, I have gone with fan favorite Reed Duke, the Gentleman of Magic himself. Not because he's the Gentleman of Magic or an exceptional Magic player. Okay, those are some reasons to watch him.
Of course.
Of course. But because he's playing something that I don't think anyone else expected to face this weekend. And that is the Grixis Bolas deck.
Yeah?
He's got 4 copies of Nicol Bolas Dragon God and Nicol Bolas the Ravager. And I think if the players aren't expecting that, he may have the edge when it comes time to sideboard.
It is certainly an unorthodox choice here from Reed. We know he loves playing mid-range strategies, and he is one of the very best in the world to do it. He is a obviously great person to choose and watch.
I'm looking forward to seeing that deck in action. Now let's hear from Maria and Sean who their players are to watch.
Thanks so much, Alias V. All right, Day 9, now's the big moment.
All right.
Lock it in. Who's going to win the whole thing?
A lot of pressure. Okay, my player to watch is going to be Brad Nelson. And I feel like this is a little bit of an easy one, you know?
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
He's
come on,
been
softball.
just crushing on the MPL circuit. But I want to bring up Brad for 2 reasons. First of all, he is not even playing today. He is already on to day 2. So it's very easy to get caught up in the storylines of day 1 and forget about the top-ranked players as is. Brad also is running a version of what is kind of considered to be the core strong deck in the format.
The deck to beat.
Esper Hero. And it's real easy for people to get caught up in, oh, here's the interesting counter, here's a new weird idea that we've been seeing, and starting to focus and talk about that, and to kind of neglect the fact that, yeah, Esper Hero is really solid.
It's a great deck.
It's won recent tournaments, and we have one of the best players piloting one of the most strong decks.
All right, great choice. Me personally, I'm going to go with coverage friend Simon Gertzen. He's a Pro Tour champion. He retired from coverage only to then qualify for this tournament almost immediately. He is so smart. He's an amazing player. You know, sitting next to him at the desk, I just absorbed, you know, if I absorbed 1/1,000,000th of his knowledge, I would be happy. So do not count this guy out, bringing a Nexus of Fate deck without Wilderness Reclamation. So, you know, no parachute here for Simon Gertzen. But I do think it is a really, really strong meta call, and he's my player to watch this week.
Like who does that? Who goes from caster to player? It's normally the opposite direction. Like, once you're washed up, that's when you join the coverage team. That's why I'm here today. I can no longer compete at top levels, man. Every time I sit down to play,
you just win.
My hands are hurt from playing and trying so hard. I mean, that is an achievement to just shrug your shoulders and go, yeah, no, I'm just going to become a badass
I think
again.
I'm just going to win.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
All right, well, it is almost time for our first feature match of the day. Let's throw it over to Alias V and Cedric Phillips.
Thank you so much, Maria. All right, Cedric, we've got a great game to kick us off here. We're going to see Jason Chan, also known as Amaz, and Ondrej Strasky squaring off first. Let's take a look at the head-to-head. Jason Chan, having started playing Magic in 2015, played in 4 Mythic Championships with 1,011 arena games lifetime. Ondrej Strasky having started in 2007, 22 Mythic Champions under his belt, championships, apologies, and 5,655 arena games. That's a pretty big number.
Yeah, he's played a little bit more Magic than Jason, that is to be sure. Oftentimes calls himself retired in quotes on Twitter. He is very much unretired, I would say.
Oh yeah, no, he is still well and truly in this game and looking to do even better in this one. So let's have a look now at the deck lists for both players. Jason Chan up first.
Let's start things off here with Amaz, who's playing Sultai Dreadhorde this weekend. Key cards here are Wild Growth Walker and Command the Dreadhorde, and happy to explain why that is the case. Wild Growth Walker, along with Jadelight Ranger and Merfolk Branchwalker, are the core package of this deck. This is the Explore package that we have come to know and love here in Standard Magic. Wild Growth Walker, of course, being able to grow and gain some life along the way. The Jadelight Ranger and Merfolk Branchwalker will make sure that you can hit your land drops in order to get to the very powerful 6-mana sorcery in Command the Dreadhorde, the namesake card of this deck. You're going to find 3 main deck copies here for Jason. The big thing about Command the Dreadhorde is you want to keep your life total high enough so that when you are actually resolving the spell, you're able to get back a ton of stuff. It can be Wild Growth Walker and, of course, Jadelight Ranger and Merfolk Branchwalker, but don't forget about those Planeswalkers from everyone's deck. And speaking of Planeswalkers, Ondrej Strasky has many of them. Hero of Precinct 1 and Teferi Time Raveler are key cards here, but it is worth noting, as I talked to Ondrej early this morning, Hero of Precinct 1 only 3 copies as opposed to the stock 4 that you would find in most deck lists of Esper Hero, finding that they want to build their deck, Ondrej and his teammates, as a 75-card deck as opposed to 60 plus 15. And what I mean by that is 60 for game 1 and then 15 cards to sideboard with. Teferi Time Raveler and Teferi Hero of Dominaria you're of course going to find, and those are going to be great targets for Command the Dreadhorde, which both players do have. 3 for Amaz, 2 for Ondrej Strasky. So that card is going to be a key one in this matchup, and it's really going to kind of set the paces about how things are going to go. It should be interesting. Both decks clearly very well built.
All right, well, now that we have seen both players' decks, let's get to know them a little better.
Hey guys, I'm Amaz. I'm originally from Hong Kong.
I'm Ondrej Strasky, and I'm from Czech Republic.
Competitive Magic to me is really fun because it's all about the journey to self-improvement, right? You don't compare your results and your performance to other people, but you always compare to yourself.
Competing is what draws me to the game mostly. I was like, ever since a very young age, I was a huge competitor.
I'm gonna do the best I can with the deck that I actually like this time. At the end of the day, having a top result in like a Mythic Championship would mean a lot.
I just want to win. I just want to take the first prize. I want to qualify for the World Championship. $100,000. That would be really nice.
Hey friends, Becca Scott here. I'm your correspondent on the floor. I'm going to be checking in with players all weekend long to see what they're going through after each of their matches. But right now, we're going to introduce to the stage those people you've been hearing all about. First up, the streamer from Hong Kong. He's played in 10 different countries of Grand Prix. And Jason Chan, Amaz. Welcome to the stage. And another of our challengers from the Czech Republic with top 4 in the Mythic Invitational 2019 and 2 Mythic Championship top 8s under his belt, Ondrej Strasky. Let's hop on over to Alias V and Cedric Phillips, who have the call on this first match.
Thank you very much, Becca. While the players get themselves ready for this match, Cedric, let's talk a little bit about their decks. How do they square off against each other?
Well, this matchup should be a pretty long one. We're going to work ourselves deep into the mid-game and early stages of the late game. Given that both of these players are trying to resolve Command the Dreadhorde, that's going to be kind of the key card. For Amaz, he has 3 main deck copies as opposed to Ondrej, who only has 2, but an additional 1 in his sideboard. That card is extremely powerful in this matchup, and I don't want to simplify things too much, but one could argue the first to resolve that card for a relevant amount is going to get the job done. So, the then the question becomes, how do I stop my opponent from resolving Command the Dreadhorde, maybe the namesake card of the entire matchup? For Jason, he has, of course, the Explorer package in Wild Growth Walker, J-Light Ranger, and Merfolk Branch Walker. If those cards can pressure Ondrej's life total, it's going to make it very difficult for Ondrej to actually cast Command the Dreadhorde for a relevant amount because he doesn't have that much life to work with. So that's kind of the goal, I think, for Jason in the early stages of the game. Of course, hitting your land drops and resolving some Planeswalkers like Nissa and Tamiyo, certainly going to matter, but if I'm Jason, I want to get Ondrej's life total pretty low. Now, if I'm Ondrej, I naturally want to keep my life total pretty high. I want to find one of my 2 copies of Command the Dreadhorde in the main deck and resolve that for a ton. Now, Teferis are going to allow him to buy some time. He's got Basilica Belhan. He has Hero of Precinct 1 as well. So he's got some elements, but his deck is built a little bit differently than most Esper Hero decks. One card we didn't get to touch on when we were going over the deck list is copies of Ixalan's Binding.
Yes.
There are 2 main deck copies of that card here for Ondrej, and what's unique about that card is it's somewhat expensive, yes, but it is a permanent answer to a lot of problems. Talking about Tamiyo, talking about Nissa, who shakes the world. So that could come up in our games. And I don't want to forget about the 1 main deck copy of Kaya's Wrath. If Amaz is going to be pressuring Ondrej quite a bit, there's only 1 copy. It could come up, he could draw it, he could find it, and then that would, of course, slow down the entire attack squad of Jason Chan. So we're going to have to see how things kind of shake out in game 1. Sideboarding, it gets real complex then. We'll get to that once we get to it, but at the end of the day, I expect these games to go somewhat long. There is the potential for a shorter game, and if that shorter game does occur, that's really good news for Amaz, because that means that his Wild Growth Walkers, his J-Light Rangers, and of course his Merfolk Branch Walkers are dealing a lot of damage.
Yeah, so there is a potential, like you said, for the game to be over relatively quickly, so Strasky's got to somehow stave off that attack from Amaz.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Say if he gets turn 3 Nissa, who shakes the world, that's a really, really great start for him, but yeah. So.
That is really, really, really bad news for Strasky if that kind of start shows up. Now, of course, you're playing against a deck that has access to Llanowar Elves, so a little bit of mana acceleration there. You've got Tamiyo, who can work, it can do a really nice job of bridging you into the late game. Tamiyo is a very powerful card in this matchup, and because Strasky's deck is built so uniquely and not really a traditional build of Esper Hero with these weird 1-ofs and 2-ofs, you know, there's a potential for him to lose to an aggressive start. Again, we're looking at a deck that only has 3 copies of Hero of Precinct 1 as opposed to the stock 4 that you would be used to, right? That's a weird number that stands out on the deck list. You're seeing 1 main deck copy of Kaya's Wrath in an Esper Hero deck. Esper Hero is in the name. Hero's in the name. Why would you have a sweeper effect in a deck that is Hero of Precinct 1? Well, again, ideally, it's to give your deck a little bit of flexibility. Again, when I talked to Ondrej Strasky before this tournament started, I said, your deck looks a little bit strange with your numbers. I don't quite understand it. Help me get a better idea. And his thought process, along with his teammates, was, this is a 75-card deck. This isn't like the Mythic Invitational we saw at PAX East where it was best of 1 in only game 1s. We're talking about first game main deck, 2-game sideboard, assuming everything goes appropriately for both players. So we take a look at opening hands here, and things get a little bit interesting because you don't see that aggressive of a hand here for Jason.
So the players are ready to get things underway in the very first match of the Mythic Championship here in Las Vegas. Taking a look at the opening hands, we've got J-Light Ranger and the namesake of the deck, Command the Dreadhorde, in the opening hand. It's very tempting to keep any hand you see Command the Dreadhorde in, isn't it? It's just like, yeah, I like that card. I would like to play that very shortly. So, as you said, it might be a race towards whoever can resolve that card first, but starting things off, just a forest on the side for Amaz. No Llanowar Elf to help him out into ramping here yet. And on the other side, we've got a handful of land and Teferi, as well as 2 Thought Erasers.
Key thing to note here, first, Ondrej took a mulligan. Scryed his top card to the bottom. You see a hand with 2 copies of Thought Eraser, and then it's a Teferi Time Rattler. So he's got some plays in the early stages of the game. A discard spell, and then into 3-mana Teferi. A very powerful start. You take a look at Amaz's hand here. It does have the copy of Command the Dreadhorde, a key card in the matchup, as we talked about. Hydroid Krasis in case we get a little bit later, and then J-Light Ranger is probably going to be the first play of the game as Watergrave is going to enter the battlefield tapped. So that aggressive start that I talked about with the 2 drops, that's non-existent. There's no mana acceleration start here either. So we're going to work ourselves into a slower game.
For sure. Thought Eraser now taking a look in the hand of Amaz, and Ondrej Strasky is going to see some pretty key cards there that he might wish to take. Is there an option, or is there a consideration to take the J-Light Ranger first and foremost?
So there are some powerful cards here. Again, we've already highlighted Command the Dreadhorde enough. I think everybody's got an idea now at home how powerful that one is. That could be a choice. Hydroid Krasis, I don't think is a great option here because, you know, it's just not that relevant at this stage of the game, and it might not be that relevant over the course of the game, period. J-Light Ranger, however, is the first play that Amaz can make, and it might be the play that Ondrej wants to take away from him. But I don't want to forget about Tamiyo here either. Tamiyo does a beautiful job of bridging the gap, Let's say you take Command the Dreadhorde. Okay, Tamiyo can return that. You take Jadelight Ranger. Obviously, Tamiyo can return that. And Tamiyo is a card that has a lot of loyalty as well, so attacking it down is not going to be easy.
For sure, but there are 2 Thought Erasures available to Strasky, so he could take the Jadelight Ranger and then follow that up the next turn by taking Tamiyo Collector of Tales.
That's certainly worth noting, and we can't forget that Tamiyo actually makes discard spells pretty bad, given its static text as well. So I think at some stage with these discard spells, we're going to see Tamiyo be taken. It's just a question of, do you want to take it now or do you want to take it with the next one? Looks like he's going to take it now.
All right, so he has taken Tamiyo Collector of Tales. She is in the graveyard, so she won't be able to filter through Amaz's library just yet. He's going to hope to find another one of those. Jadelight Ranger now is going to explore twice, clear out 2 cards, or have a look at least. 2 cards and hitting 2 lands. Now, that's usually, a lot of people would go, oh, drat, we hit 2 lands, but that's a good thing for this deck, right, Cedric?
Well, in this instance, this is kind of interesting, right? When you resolve Jadelight Ranger, if you were Amaz, you already had a couple of lands in your hand in those 2 copies of Forest, so you already had 5 mana. You're ideally looking for 1 more for Command the Dreadhorde. So in that spot, if I'm Amaz, I was kind of looking for maybe 1 land, 1 spell, potentially, but now, he's able to pick up 2 lands there in Breeding Pool and Hinterland Harbor. Lands are not going to be an issue for the rest of the game. Double black is there with Woodland Cemetery and Watery Grave, so life is good as far as mana is concerned. You've got enough to cast Command the Dreadhorde, and you have a mana sink here in Hydroid Krasis. The question is how are we going to bridge the gap? We don't have our Tamiyo anymore. We don't have Anissa who shakes the world anymore. So there's really nothing bridging the gap here on turns 4 and turns 5, really just yet. Yes, Hydroid Krasis is a card you can play on turn 4, but a 2/2 flyer drawing a card, not all that exciting, especially in the face of Teferi.
Strasky running out Teferi. Time Raveler now sending the Jadelight Ranger back to Amaz's hand. And I would imagine the Jadelight Rangers is just going to take another explore, see if we can find potentially 2 spells to play or to find another Tamiyo. Let's see what Jason Amaz decides to do here.
Options here. Of course, Jadelight Rangers, you mentioned, and Hydroid Krasis for 2. The hand's pretty clear. I think everybody at home can certainly see the options for our players. It's a question of now, do I actually want to go to Hydroid Krasis for 2? Because, again, with how many lands Amaz has in his hand, Hydroid Krasis for 2 is just not all that exciting. It looks like this is going to be the play. It's going to gain a life and draw a card, and unfortunately here for Amaz, he has found another land, so this Jadelight Ranger is going to have to be working overtime on Explore, probably next turn.
Oh yeah, so we will hope that the Jadelight Ranger finds not a land for Amaz. And on Strasky's side of the board, he's going to run out Narset, Parter of Veils, and immediately look at the top 4 cards of the library to see what is going to help him out in this matchup. Still a handful of land and a Thought Erasure as well. So not the ideal hand for both players here. They're a little bit flooded.
Yeah, it looks like Narset may have missed, which is actually pretty rare, especially with the build that Strasky has here this week. And another land off the top there for Amaz. Again, these are not ideal draws for either player. This is what makes Magic fun sometimes. When your deck is actually working on all cylinders, well, life is easy. You're casting your spells, you're doing your thing. Both players are flooding out pretty badly here. Jadelight Ranger is hoping to mitigate some
there we
flood.
go.
Now that is a good reveal.
That's a great card to find. That's exactly what you want, but it's in the bin. And Nissa, who shakes the world, is on top now. Does this get binned, or are we going to see this in play, Cedric?
Well, I'm a little surprised to see the Tamiyo go to the graveyard, truth be told, because that is such a powerful card, especially when you're not being pressured. So to see that go to the graveyard is a little bit surprising. However, Nissa is a very powerful card that can bridge the gap, as we mentioned. Hydroid Krasis is going to knock Narset down to just 1 counter, so that means we're not going to get the Narset activation, and the Teferi being on 2 right now is pretty irrelevant at this stage of things because it can't really bounce anything. So checking Narset there is actually pretty nice. If you are Strasky, you were looking for some sort of power card. Hero Precinct 1 is
Hero Precinct 1.
It's okay.
Right.
It's
Trust
okay.
me, I have a plan.
So the deck that the namesake card of the deck, the Hero Precinct 1, is going to come down, and we'll probably follow that up with a Thought Erasure just to take a look at the hand of Amaz, and I believe he might lose the Command the Dreadhorde here. But no, deciding rather to play it in the draw step.
Yep, with the power of Teferi, able to play this in the draw step to be able to take care of the Nissa who shakes the world or the Command the Dreadhorde that Strasky already knew about. What Strasky didn't know is that his opponent is flooding badly, so there are only a couple of options there. You see the selection of Command the Dreadhorde in this instance saying, you know what, I think I'll be able to beat Nissa who shakes the world over time, but I don't think I'll be able to beat Command the Dreadhorde. So I think for Strasky, that's a pretty easy selection. However, still in trouble regardless, as he's pretty behind on the battlefield right now.
Yeah, what does he have to deal with Nissa currently? Nothing at the moment. So he's going to have to find an answer for this Planeswalker who is quite powerful. She can certainly run away with the game if left unchecked.
this is one of those times where those main deck copies of Ixalan's Binding are certainly going to matter. Yes, Nissa's going to be able to generate a 3/3 that can do some attacking. If I'm Strasky, you know, I need some favorable draw steps right now. Command the Dreadhorde is certainly one, and he has 2 main deck copies of that card. But this is one of those times where one of those main deck copies of Kaya's Wrath could actually be quite relevant in this stage. If his draw steps are, they go from, let's say, Ixalan's Binding on Nissa into Kaya's Wrath to clear up all the creatures, life is pretty good. He's got a lot of life to work with, sitting at 20, but the Planeswalker advantage is going to start to go away because I think we're going to see Nissa, who shakes the world, start to go towards attacking Planeswalkers. Hydroid Krasis can help in that regard as well, and we can't forget that the Jade Light Ranger being a 4/3 is bigger than what Strasky has in the battlefield.
Yeah, so now it's a decision for Strasky. Do I block? Do I try and prevent damage going to myself or to my Planeswalkers? Of course, we can't block the Hydroid Krasis. It's flying, so he'll get through for the 2 points of damage on Teferi Time Raveler, while the Hinterland Harbor attempts to take care of Narset. There's no real reason for Strasky to protect the Narset now, is there?
Not a ton. I will say, you know, it does a nice job of slowing down copies of Hydroid Krasis, future ones, but past that, not a ton. You know, there's obviously not going to be any more activations of Narset in this particular game for that particular Narset, so letting that go wouldn't surprise me too much. There is a reason to try to defend Teferi here if it does make some sense, but I think that Jason's going to try to make that pretty difficult here for Andre.
So a double block now from the Hero Precinct 1 and the 1/1 Soldier token to kill off the Jade Light Ranger. The Hinterland Harbor will stay alive, as well as the Hydroid Krasis. So no blockers left on the field for Strasky. He's got 2 lands in hand. He needs to find something, but if we it's just lands all around today.
For both players at the early stages of this tournament, yes, it is.
Let's see what we got here. Oh, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, makes an appearance. So we got Big Teferi and Little Teferi available now to Ondrej Strasky. How is this going to turn the game around for him?
Well,
if at all?
This is going to be Strasky's play. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play the powerful Planeswalker. Now, of course, there are 2 options with the Planeswalker, just drawing a card and untapping a couple of lands, or, of course, tucking something away. One could make an argument of tucking away Nissa, who shakes the world. I'm not in love with tucking away Hydroid Krasis because that will show up and actually be able to draw some cards. So those are kind of your options in this instance. I wouldn't be surprised to see Teferi bite the dust here pretty soon, but you got to play the powerful Planeswalker on this battlefield, and that's what Strasky's going to do.
My responsibility.
So let's see what Teferi does here. He is going to put target non-land permanent into its owner's library. 3rd from the top, so goodbye, Nissa. You are on the bench for 3 turns. We'll see you in a little bit. Still land. What is this? Look how many lands are in Amaz's hand.
So here's what's interesting. If you are Ondrej Strasky, you need Amaz to draw lands.
Yes.
Because you are so far behind on the battlefield, and because you're going to probably lose both of your Planeswalkers right now. You see Amaz lining up his attacks on both Planeswalkers. So if you are rooting for Strasky, you're happy to see Amaz drawing lands because that's what you need to have happen. You know a Nissa who shakes the world will be showing up pretty soon, and if you're Strasky, you need to start drawing some type of spell. Command the Dreadhorde is your best draw in this instance, but he wasn't able to find it.
No.
Sitting at 20 life, going to be falling a little bit lower than that now, though.
Going to go down to 15, a land off the top for Strasky, and a Wild Growth Walker for Amaz. If he can find some Explore creatures, we're going to pad that life total. We're going to get some more cards in the bin or into the hand. Basilica Bellhaunt is not going to be doing all that much here, unfortunately. Discarding some cards, gaining some life, but all the cards in Amaz's hand, he's not going to be sad to lose.
Well, here's what I'll say about Basilica Bellhaunt. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's a 3/4, so it checks the lands that Nissa's going to generate. And Nissa, of course, we knew he was drawing because of being tucked away by Teferi. Andre knew that. You and everybody at home knew that. We knew that here in the booth. So Nissa's going to shake the world again. Obviously, it's going to generate a little bit of a creature and start continuing to attacking. However, a 3/4 on this battlefield is quite good. It does a nice job of checking Wild Growth Walker and the lands that are animated. If I'm Strasky right now, I'm thinking one thing. My life total is at 18. If I draw Command the Dreadhorde, I can get so much stuff back and be able to win this game. As I talked about at the beginning of this matchup, if his life total is low and he draws Command the Dreadhorde, let's say it's less than 10, then it's not so good. But right now it's at 18. That means if he's able to peel the powerful sorcery, he can basically get everything back from both graveyards and say, you can't win anymore.
Yep.
So if I'm Amaz, you are crossing your fingers that Strasky doesn't draw that card.
Like you said earlier, it's very much a race to see who can resolve Command the Dreadhorde first, because currently there's some good pickings in both graveyards. There's Planeswalkers, there are tough creatures. Yeah.
Remember,
so let's see.
That second Thought Eraser, it had the opportunity to take either Nissa or Command the Dreadhorde. Nissa, of course, could be played the very next turn. And he took Command the Dreadhorde anyway, thinking that I can't beat that card over the course of the game. Duress the draw step here, obviously not particularly exciting for Strasky.
Ooh, Tamio, Collector of Tales now for Amaz. She can bring back something from the graveyard or search his library for a specific card. So it's going to be interesting to see what Tamio decides to do here.
Tamio is a very scary card here if you are Ondrej Strasky. This has the ability to go digging through the graveyard and get something back.
Yeah, we can get back that Command the Dreadhorde.
Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if all Command the Dreadhorde is the choice here. And that duress has just gotten way worse. It was already pretty bad, but it's gotten, you know, basically useless at this stage of the game now, too.
Would that just seal the deal here if he grabs Command the Dreadhorde and just says, all right, cool, I'm going to grab myself all my creatures, your planeswalkers, thank you very much, goodbye?
Well, it seals the deal for a couple different reasons. One, if I'm Strasky, I'm ahead on the battlefield, right? Look at his battlefield as opposed to Strasky's battlefield, right? If I'm Amaz, I'm saying, okay, I've got all the creatures, I've got the active planeswalkers, so I'm winning simply on the battlefield alone. As far as card economy is concerned, I've got the best card in hand, and he doesn't know about the duress that Strasky has, but we do, and we know the duress is basically useless at this stage of things. But we can't forget that because Nis is on the battlefield, these lands tap for double green, which means that casting Command the Dreadhorde this turn is not particularly difficult if we have access to double black, which we know that Amaz does. So we're going to see the 1-2 punch of Tamio into Command the Dreadhorde. This is going to be a pretty nice turn here, I have to imagine, for Amaz. He's got to be feeling great about this game.
Look at this. He's assembled super friends on the side there. Hey, I like your planeswalkers. Thank you very much. I will play them now. And we are just going to remove the Basilica Bellhaunt out of the way. This will help him the next turn to gain some extra life back. That is Ondrej Strasky. But yeah, very much the game is in Amaz's favor here.
You got to remember, this matchup is so tailored around Command the Dreadhorde. Game 1, Amaz has the advantage in Command the Dreadhorde because he has 3 main deck copies as opposed to Strasky's 2. When we get to sideboarding, you'll see that Strasky has a 3rd one in his sideboard, and it's really built around this card. Now, was Amaz kind of winning? Yes, he was already, but Command the Dreadhorde or finding the Tamio to get the Command the Dreadhorde back sealed the deal. We're going to see another draw step here from Strasky. I don't think it's going to matter too much. As good as Narset is, not
Ondrej Strasky down to 2. Basilica Bellhaunt can help pad that life total a little bit, but there's just too many creatures on the board, and Ondrej Strasky says, all right, good sir, let's go to game 2. Sideboard time. Cedric, what do you do if you are either player now?
Well, where to begin? Where to begin? It looks like we're going to begin here with Amaz and his sideboard. So you already see him moving some cards in and out here. Thrashing Bronson on Elder Spell are options. Masker Girl an option here as well. Not surprised to see the Elder Spell come in. That's going to be a very popular card all weekend long with the density of Esper decks that are in the field, and Sultai Dreadhorde can play it. But I do want to continue to harp on the point that Command the Dreadhorde is the most important card in the matchup. Tamio does a beautiful job of bringing it back if it gets discarded, as we saw in that particular game. So discard is not the end-all be-all to stopping that card. Removal isn't bad, but again, you got to remember that if you are Amaz, you get to be the player who gets to take an aggressive slant to the games because of the Explorer package. So you don't have to have a ton of spot removal after sideboard if you don't want it. Assassin's Trophy is nice because it's versatile. It can kill a lot of different things, so I wouldn't be surprised to leave that in. And of course, the Elder Spell is going to take care of the Planeswalker that Esper is going to bring to the table. Negate's an interesting one, solely because it's a Fairy Time Raveler. A Teferi Time Raveler, of course, is going to shut down the counter spells. But what's fun about tournaments like this, when there are so many great players in the room, is you get to play this little game of do-si-do, where I know that you know I have negate, and you know that I know I have negate, so am I bringing it in? Are you going to play around it, or are you not going to play around it? There will be situations, right, where the opponent doesn't have Teferi Time Raveler, and negate's the only thing saving you from Command the Dreadhorde. So I do think it is worth bringing in, because truth be told, Alias, you're not always going to have Teferi. You'll have it a lot, but you're not always going to have it.
All right, so for those of you just joining now, we are in the very first match of the Mythic Championship 3 here in Las Vegas. It is Ondrej Strasky versus Jason Amaz Chan. And we have just seen Amaz command the Dreadhorde, bring back everything from the graveyard, and say, hey, you know what, Strasky, I like your stuff. I'm going to play it. How are you going to deal with it?
Now, I do want to mention, as these players take a look at their opening hands, when talking to Strasky and his teammates, they said they built their deck as a 75-card deck, not a 60 plus 15.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but we have a 1-land keep.
Yes, we do.
That is a risky play, but let's see if it pays off. We've got a turn 1 Llanowar Elf into a Merfolk Branch Walker or a Wildgrowth Walker. So this is going to be interesting to see if this Llanowar survives. He might be all right, but ooh, keeping a 1-lander, that makes me nervous.
I love it. So I like keeping the 1-lander, but I also like the Tyrant Scorn here. So you can keep a 1-lander in this instance because you're on the draw and because you have Explorer creatures. So, you know, one could say, oh man, so lucky drawing the Hinterland Harbor, but look, you're on the draw. This is a slow matchup. And of course, Merfolk Branchwalker and Jaylight Ranger are going to do a nice job of finding you lands. So it does look risky, especially when you see the Llanowar Elves die, but not the end of the world. Now, this is bad news.
Oh, yeah?
This Teferi is really bad news because this means that Teferi is going to bounce something, a little nice tempo advantage, and you're going to get to keep your Teferi. If I'm Strasky, I'm feeling really good about things, as here's a Merfolk Branchwalker.
He still has 2 Thoughty Rages to follow up that Teferi Time Raveler, so all this good stuff that we see in Amaz's hand is going to be easy pickings for those 2 spells. So let's see what Strasky decides to go for here. Any consideration to Tyrant Score on the Merfolk Branchwalker, or just, leave it there for now?
A lot of options here. I think the easy thing to do is start by plussing Teferi. Let's start there. Let's get that out of the way and make sure we don't miss that. Thought Eraser is an option. Tyrant Scorn on the Merfolk Branchwalker is an option. Playing another copy of Teferi Time Raveler and bouncing the Merfolk Branchwalker is an option. Ondrej, of course, making the top 4 of the Mythic Invitational and PAX East, is a very skilled player. You're going to see him take some time on this turn because this one is not easy. Further, it's going to set the paces as we work ourselves into the early stages of the mid-game of how things are going to go. You want to have an idea of what your opponent is working with Thought Eraser, and you may be willing to sacrifice that Teferi to get an idea of what your opponent is working with. And more importantly, the Surveil here might find the 4th land that might chain you into the 5th land, which is pretty important as this game progresses.
Exactly right. We might also see Ondrej Strasky play the upkeep Thoughty Razier again, just to see what the card draw is. Maybe get something a little bit spicier than the Nissa or the Tomio in the hands currently. You'll also see that Elder Spell there. When does he start worrying about that? Not for the moment. It's just the 1 Teferi on the board. When he starts getting all of the Super Friends assembled, that's when he's going to be a little more stressed out about that. But deciding not to Thought Erase anything at this point, but he could still do it whenever he wants.
Yeah, so this is nice, right? You have the flexibility of saying, you know what, I can either Tyrant Scorn or Thought Eraser because I can play my spells at instant speed. So we'll see, actually, what Strasky wants to do. He's going to go with Tyrant Scorn to take care of this Merfolk Branchwalker, and part of the reason for this is because he wants to protect the Teferi. Now, we're going to see a J-Light Ranger here from Amaz, and now this is what I was talking about with the negate, where this is a really tough decision because you do have a card in J-Light Ranger that can take care of Teferi, but okay. Amaz is saying negate, not exactly what I'm looking for. I need more lands. Found one, put it on the battlefield. Great. The negate, if I'm Strasky, because we have open deck lists, he says, all right, check that off. That's taken care of. What he may not be thinking about is a Spell Pierce that is in Jason Chan's hand that may come up in later stages of the game if you're able to get Teferi Time Raveler off the battlefield.
Yeah, but we got to get rid of that Teferi first, which the second Teferi now, replacing the first, getting rid of the J-Light Ranger, just keeping the battlefield as clear as a whistle. So let's see now what Amaz does here. Do we run out the Tamio, start digging through the deck? Do we get the Wild Growth Walkers down to try and get the J-Light Ranger life gains synergy going, or what is the play here? J-Light Ranger seems to be the pick for Amaz.
That's what he's thinking right now. Again, there are options here aplenty. 2 Wild Growth Walkers, could play Tamio, could play J-Light Ranger and leave a mana up. Leaving a mana up for Spell Pierce is obviously not a thing right now because Teferi Time Raveler is on the battlefield, but if I'm Amaz, the only thing I'm concerned with right now, because we're going to be playing a long game, is just hitting my land drops. Let me make sure I hit my land drops. I do have the ability to play 2 spells in a turn if I do hit a land, which he did, which allowed him to play the Wild Growth Walker. Hit your lands, hit your lands, hit your lands, play your Command the Dreadhorde. That's how you're going to win this game, especially with Ondrej Strasky truthfully kind of floundering around right now.
Yeah, he's getting very close to casting Command the Dreadhorde. Just 1 more land needed. That J-Light Ranger helping remove a few more things off the top, filling that graveyard to just give him some more goodies to go picking out of the graveyard there.
And I do want to reiterate something here, the importance of Command the Dreadhorde, but you might be thinking, well, Command the Dreadhorde, how good is it right now? It doesn't matter how good it is. It's just got to resolve, because that means that that card is essentially drawing you 4 or 5 cards. We know there's Teferi in the graveyard. Okay, I'll take one of those, and I got some knuckleheads in my own graveyard, and just get those back, and then that's totally fine because it forces Strasky to change the way he's going to play the game. So what's difficult for Strasky right now is he's kind of floundering around with the 3rd Teferi for the game. In the back of his head, he's thinking the entire time, please don't have Command the Dreadhorde. Please don't have it, because if you have it, I can't win.
Ooh, drawing another Nissa who shakes the world off the top. Amaz just has a handful of gas. Now it's just a case of, all right, what do I want to play? I have very many options to work with here. So the J-Light Ranger can get rid of the 3rd Teferi Time Raveler, but we're going to see Nissa who shakes the world hit the board. Going to animate this Hinterland Harbor and start swinging in with the Vigilant 3/3 land.
Again, this is kind of the advantage of being the aggressor in this matchup if you're Jason Chan, because it's kind of the best of both worlds. If we're going to play an aggressive game, well, I've got the creatures to do that and you don't, right? There's only 3 copies of Hero of Precinct 1 and then 2 Basilica Bellhaunts in Strasky's deck, so he can't really play an aggressive game and maybe say, you know what, I'm going to kill you before you kill me. That's going to favor Jason, so to me, the early stages of the game favor Jason Amaz Chan. But as we work ourselves into the mid-game, things also favor him here as well, because look at his hand as opposed to Strasky's.
Oh, this is great. With that Teferi off the board, the Elder Spell is going to get Spell Pierced. He does have the mana up to play, or to dissolve that spell, so the Elder Spell will hit. But he has found another land, which will allow him to play the Commander Dreadhorde this turn, I believe.
So that play looks weird, right? Where you say, you're going to Spell Pierce into 2 open mana. Why are you Spell Piercing into 2 open mana? That doesn't make any sense. They can pay. Well, now that Strasky has paid and resolved the Elder Spell, that means the shields are completely down if Strasky were to have some sort of weird counterspell in this instance. So that means that we are clear for takeoff for anything that we want to do this turn. That means Command the Dreadhorde, that means Nissa, that could mean the combination of Tamiyo and Wildgrowth Walker. But Amaz, you cast Command the Dreadhorde last game. Looks like he doesn't want to do it just yet.
Okay, all right.
Taking Nissa instead, gonna build more of an advantage with the Planeswalkers. Fair enough.
He could just beat up Strasky with, you know, his tree people or his land walker things.
Yeah, I mean, more Hinterland Harbor action, the better.
Yeah. Well, let's go. Let's go. So we're going to be swinging in here for 9 points of damage. Strasky's life total being threatened here, so that Commander Dreadhorde he has in his hand is not going to resolve all that well, but he still needs to find the 2 other lands to be able to cast it, so he has missed a few land drops here, and he has just decided, you know what, I cannot keep up with this. Amaz takes the very first game of the Mythic Championship here in Las Vegas. Congratulations. Clean 2-0.
I do think that's how that matchup is going to go a decent amount of the time. What's really difficult there for Amaz, or excuse me, for Strasky, is just the ability to actually keep up with what's going on, because you get to just continue to be aggressive over the course of the game. So that's what we saw is, I'm going to keep attacking you with my creatures, with my planeswalkers, and eventually you will bend and then break, and that's what happened.
It's very, very strange to see. In the first game, both players flooded incredibly. In the second game, it seemed like they were just scrounging for land, trying to find it. And yeah, Amaz just coming out with the win there.
There was this small window, right, in game number 1 for Strasky to find Command the Dreadhorde, and you saw just how important that card was and how it loomed over the entire game. If I'm Strasky that entire game, I'm just thinking to myself, if Amaz ever has Command the Dreadhorde, I can't win. So if that resolves, I can't win. And yes, Amaz had the opportunity to resolve Command the Dreadhorde there, but truth be told, you know, any way he kind of wanted to go, because he had such an advantage in card economy on the battlefield. He was ahead in so many different ways. Playing Nissa plus Wildgrowth Walker post-combat, also totally fine. But Command the Dreadhorde, Strasky had the opportunity in game 1 to draw it, which would have changed everything. He didn't. We got to see Amaz resolve it. And at the end of the day, in that matchup, that's what that entire card, the entire matchup is built around that entire card. We saw that come to fruition. And Jason's deck is just better at playing that card than Amaz's is. Excuse me, Amaz's deck is better at playing that card than Strasky's is. And that's the victory.
All right, so very well done there by Amaz. We're going to throw it over to Maria to hear more about it.
Hey, thanks so much, Alias. Yeah, I love Command the Dreadhorde. Nice to see that deck crushing. Well, I've got some updates for you here on some of our Mythic Invitational competitors that are playing in this tournament. They're here playing this championship, which is a big deal. Amy D'Amico, a.k.a. Amazonian, top 16, by the way, in the Mythic Invitationals, played more than 8,600 arena games. That's a lot. She's a full-time streamer, playing Celestia tokens, of course. Ashley Espinosa, also playing in this tournament. Muffin Pie on Twitch, started playing in 2014 with the great set Khans of Tarkir, lives for board game night and karaoke night. She's playing Gruul mid-range at this tournament. Then, of course, Jessica Estefan, new member of the MPL, the first woman to ever win a Grand Prix, top 16 in the Mythic Invitational as well. Here at this tournament, loves to win on turn 4 or sooner if you can. And of course, Vanessa Hinestroza, who is Nessa Meow Meow, started playing in 2017, loves aggro decks, and she really hopes to play Amazonian at this tournament. By the way, Amy D'Amico is up against Eric Froelich this round, currently up a game over the Hall of Famer and MPL member Vanessa Hinestroza playing Mike Sigrist. Mike Sigrist currently up a game, so tough matches against the MPL for some of our Mythic Invitational players at this tournament. But for right now, let's head over to Becca, who's with Amaz.
That's right. Thank you, Maria. I am with Amaz. How are you feeling after your first match win of the tournament?
Feels good. Quite relieved. You know, first feature match is kind of daunting, but I got through it, so yeah, feels really good.
Now, in that first game, you were a little flooded with land. In the second, you were really searching for the land. How are you feeling in those different situations?
Well, I'm playing the explore package, like all the creatures can explore, so it doesn't really matter if I get like a little iffy on the mana, because, you know, generally speaking, I should be able to get there. Yeah, my opponent, Ondrej, he got kind of mana screwed too, so yeah, we were just kind of scrambling to get stuff on the board.
Absolutely. And when you cast that Command the Dreadhorde that you had in game 1, was that the moment that you kind of thought, okay, I've got this locked down, I got all my super friends out here? Or were you still a little unsure?
Yeah, I just need to not misclick, basically. So then I just double check to make sure everything's in place. And then, Commander Dreadhorde just wins that matchup really easily when it resolves.
Yeah, you can't train your own life when you're casting that, of course, because you're casting with your life total instead of mana. How do you feel like the Sultai Dreadhorde is going to match up in this metagame? Are there any things that you're nervous about?
So when I prepared for my deck list, I was either going to play Esper or Sultai, and then I thought Sultai was a little bit better against Esper in that head-to-head, so that's why I chose that deck. I hope it does well. I only have a few weeks to practice before this, so just pretty much also chose one of my favorite decks. So hopefully it matches up well. I get good matchups, and I get roll high, and make day 2.
Well, it seems like you accurately predicted the popularity of Esper Control and Esper Hero this time. So congratulations, Amaz, and we look forward to seeing what you do next. Thanks so much to you guys at home for watching. Stay tuned. We're going to have a short break and then come back with more magic.
My name is Carlos Romão. I'm former 2002 World Champion. I remember when I won my first invite to the Pro Tour, told my father, okay, so this is a professional Magic tournament. My father was like, you take like A grades on the school and then you can go. My family was always supportive since the beginning. Like without them, I wouldn't be able to be here. When I got the call, I heard, okay, so we're gonna sign you a contract. And I told my father, and he was so excited. I remember that my mother picked up the phone and said, oh, congratulations, son, blah, blah, blah. Without them, I couldn't achieve anything like on this game.
My name is Eric Froelich. I'm in the Magic Pro League and the Magic Pro Tour Hall of Fame. It just so happened that my entire 5th grade class really just started getting into Magic. I wanted to go to the local game store. I went with my dad and we bought a nice little starter kit at the time. My dad ended up reading the entire rulebook, teaching me how to play, and I played with my classmates. I ended up finding myself winning and advancing all the way to the top 8 and qualifying for the Pro Tour at 13 years old. And at that point, I was just fully immersed and wanting to go to every major tournament around me. And that's what I did. I was lucky enough to have really supportive parents who found a way to make sure everything I needed to go to, I was there.
I'm John Rolfe from Omaha, Nebraska. I've been playing Magic for about 15 years. I played Pro Tour Ixalan, which I thought was going to be my last Pro Tour, and I ended up top 4ing the whole thing. And so then it gave me this awesome opportunity, and I've always wanted to pursue this. Why not take a chance? And then I just kept winning, and now we're here. So when I got the call to join the MPL, at first I was just shocked. I had to think about it for a really long time, and Magic had been such a big part of my life that I had to at least see where the future goes. I mean, I didn't want to live with any regrets.
Happy with his opening hand.
My name is Piotr Głogowski. I live in Poland, Poznań. I have been playing Magic since return to Ravnica. Before joining the Magic Pro League, I have been streaming MTGO. I hope that with the advent of the MPL and Magic Arena, I can expand on that. I'm certainly not going to leave the older formats that I love in the dust.
Draw 2, discard 2, and straight into the concession.
Wow. My name's Reed Duke. I'm a longtime professional Magic player, and I'm a member of the inaugural Magic Pro League this year. My older brother Ian and I learned to play together, and I started taking it real seriously once I was around college age, and I've been a pro for about 6 or 7 years.
Declare my attack, says Reed Duke. Autumn says, you got it, and scoops up.
I come from a tremendously supportive family, and my mother and I sort of have this joke that I'll come home and she'll say, how was the tournament? And I'll say, oh, well, I lost in the finals. Or she'll say, well, you're still a winner to me.
Welcome back to Mythic Championship 3 here from Las Vegas. I'm Alias V alongside Cedric Phillips, and we've got more Magic action to get right back into. Cedric, we've got a goodie, don't we? We're going to see Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa versus Autumn Burchett.
Mythic Championship winner is Paulo, two-time Pro Tour champion, pardon the name. And for Autumn Burchett, Mythic Championship winner in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. So obviously I approve.
Oh yeah. Let's kick things off here right away, taking a look at the opening hands. Nice mix of land and spells. We quite like this hand if we're PBDDR, right?
So for Paulo, we are thrilled with this hand because we have Teferi Time Raveler, but don't forget about the Dovin's Veto as well. Cast down in this matchup, well, that's going to be an F-. That one's not very good against Simic Nexus and the deck that has essentially no creatures outside of Nissa, who shakes the world, making a couple of 3/3s. Command the Dreadhorde, not that big of a deal in this matchup either. So let's talk about this matchup as players get things underway. For Autumn, Simic Nexus is a deck that was very big coming into War of the Spark Standard and then died right away because of Teferi, Time Raveler, and Narset Parter of Veils. However, Autumn and Emma Handy are both playing this deck this weekend, and they feel as though they have maybe solved some of the problems of this deck against Esper, and if that is true, life is good. However, no lands means life is not particularly good right now for Autumn.
All right, so kicking things off here. First thing on the board is going to be Teferi Time Raveler for PVDDR. He is going to just simply plus Teferi because there's not going to be anything on the board really until we see a Tamio or a Nissa Who Shakes the World, as you mentioned, or even the search for Azcanta.
So if you're PV right now, you've got probably your best card in the matchup on the battlefield here in Teferi Time Raveler. However, you take a look at the hand, 2 cast downs, a Cry of the Carnarium. Both of those cards are pretty bad. This is part of the reason that Autumn and Emma have elected to play this deck, is because you can make their removal spells quite bad along with many of the other cards. However, Teferi is so overwhelmingly good in this matchup that we're going to see if this card is enough to pull Paulo to victory. In the meantime, if you're Autumn, let's just find some land drops.
Yeah,
Missed the second land. Let's just find a couple of land drops so that we can do things like Chemister's Insight and Tamio, Collector of Tales, because, look, these games are going to go long, and you don't have to really worry about your life total at all. You have to worry about the Planeswalkers digging their heels in and just taking over the game. If that doesn't happen, you're doing just fine.
Now, Cedric, for players who aren't aware of why Teferi is such a problem for the Simic Nexus deck, can you briefly explain it?
Well, yeah, happy to. Pretty easy, honestly. Wilderness Reclamation is a key card in this deck. That allows you to basically have multiple main phases and play things at instant speed. Teferi says you can't play at instant speed, so when Wilderness Reclamation untaps all of your lands on your end step, normally you would play a bunch of spells. However, Teferi says, I don't think so. I don't think you're playing any spells, actually. So Teferi greater than sign Wilderness Reclamation is the easiest way to explain it.
So Paulo just playing the Cry of the Carnarium, he knows it's not going to hit anything this turn. I might as well just get it out of my hand. It's clogging things up here. Drawing a land and finding the 5th land, as well as Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is going to hit the board. So, yeah, things are rocking for Paulo here. Autumn really needs to find another land drop. Sitting on 3 does not feel good.
So this is the problem. If you're Paulo, you've already drawn plenty of bad cards in this matchup. You've drawn a Kaya's Wrath, you drew Cry of the Carnarium, you drew 2 copies of Cast Down. All those cards are horrible in this matchup because they have nothing to kill. But you've drawn your relevant Planeswalkers in Teferi Time Raveler and Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and those cards are so powerful that they can just win the game on their own. If Autumn was just playing honestly, kind of a normal game of Magic of hitting your land drops, playing Tamio, playing Chemister's Insight, you know, looking at the top card of your deck with Search for Azcanta, things would probably be being okay because Paulo's drawn so many bad cards. But because that hasn't been the case, Alias, Paulo's able to dig his heels in with these Planeswalkers, start to draw some cards, and start to take control of the game.
So you saw Autumn there not finding another land, having to discard some cards, getting rid of the Root Snare, which doesn't really feature in this matchup. Those are more of the aggressive white strategies or the mono-red deck. And Paulo is just dropping lands, and he has the world at his fingertips basically at the moment. He can do basically whatever he wants. Just sitting there waiting, ticking up his Teferis, big T, little t, feature in here.
What's so unique about this deck selection here for Autumn, for me, is this is a total risk.
Yeah.
If Autumn has found a way to defeat these Planeswalker strategies, which we knew were going to be very popular coming into the weekend, then this is a genius pick, and they maybe just flat out win the tournament.
Yeah.
However, if Autumn has not found a great way to take care of Teferi Time Raveler and Teferi Hero of Dominaria in their planning, getting ready for this tournament, it's going to be a short tournament for Autumn. Right now, I wouldn't say we have a great answer to that because Autumn hasn't been allowed to play the game. Just a lack of lands, and the deck is not really cooperating, but fortunately for Autumn, that's why they give you 3 games.
Yeah, so now we're going to see another board clear. Just going off, not hitting anything because there's no creatures on the board in this matchup. Little T dispensed of the Search for Azcanta back to Autumn's hand and played out his own, so he's going to go digging through the library even more so now. finding all of his answers that he could possibly need once Autumn gets off the starting blocks. Teferi now untapping 2 lands. Got access to a cast down or Dovin's Veto if anything does happen. But yeah, we're just going to see another Search for Azcanta replayed. And no consideration to Dovin's Veto that, just letting it happen.
I mean, you truthfully don't really care all that much. Othakai is going to go into the graveyard here for Paulo. What Paulo is trying to do right now, he's working towards building up a graveyard in addition to everything else he's doing with the Planeswalkers to transform Search for Azcanta into Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, and start generating card advantage that way. Paulo has gotten fortunate with regards to the fact that he's drawn so many bad and dead cards in this matchup in those cast downs and Kai's Wrath hasn't come back to hurt him. This is part of the reason that Autumn is playing this deck is you draw some removal. Bad draw step, bad draw step, bad draw step, and then it feels like you've taken a couple of virtual mulligans. Paulo has been able to mitigate that because Autumn has had mana issues, so now Paulo has got, ignoring
We found a land.
Ignoring Narset, Paulo's got everything that he would want.
All right, so we have now found a land on Autumn's side of the board. Oh, but things are not looking great at the moment. The graveyard filled with growth spirals and root snares, so Tamiyo may make an appearance here, but there's a Dovin's Veto waiting on the other side for it.
And that answers your question about the Dovin's Veto, too, was, can Paulo counter that Search for Azcanta? Sure, you can make an argument for doing so, but there's probably something more powerful coming down the pipeline for Autumn, be it a Tamiyo, be it, heck, even a Chemist's Insight, who knows, that might be actually worth Dovin's Vetoing that could change the game. Blink of an Eye looks like it's going to be played on one of these Planeswalkers, which, again, has to be done on the main phase because of, I believe we're calling it Lil T?
Little T, yeah.
Little T, got it.
Yeah. Big T is going to go back to the hand now because he is very close to ultimating there. Next turn, he would have started blowing up things on Autumn's side of the board, and there's already not that much there. So let's see if there's a response to this. Do we Dovin's Veto this and start blowing things up? Is it next turn? It'd be next turn,
Yeah,
correct?
it would be next turn.
Yeah.
You'd get that emblem with Teferi, and then Teferi would vacuum away all of Autumn's permanents. Looks like Paulo's going to let this resolve, and what Paulo is really doing here is holding on this Dovin's Veto for dear life and just saying, I'm going to use this in case of emergency. That's when I'll break the glass on this. But for right now, okay, I get to just replay it again. Who cares?
Yep.
Not the end of the world. I'd like to ultimate it next turn, but if you're playing Blink of an Eye now, that probably means you have another copy of Blink of an Eye, so I don't have to really change anything.
Commander Dreadhorde being played just for one Planeswalker. It's a little bit of a want when you play a Commander Dreadhorde for only one thing, right? But when the one thing is big Teferi, yeah, that's pretty worth it, isn't it?
It's another situation where Commander Dreadhorde not the best card in the matchup, but good enough to actually play and again put more cards into your graveyard. I suppose you're making a little bit of a swap in the graveyard, but again, at the end of the day, you're just trying to build a graveyard up for Search for Azcanta, so we're going to see another Teferi, Big T, as you so elegantly called it, put another Big T into the graveyard, and you're just getting a little bit bigger towards Search for Azcanta to transform that card and really solidify your situation in this game.
Right, now you spoke about an emergency. What is this emergency that Dovin's Veto is just going to go nope to?
Can I use my Jean Grey powers and get into Paulo? I guess it's Professor X. I got to get into Paulo's head here because I don't really know what that emergency is. But this is what's so great about having Dovin's Veto and being in Paulo's situation. A great player like him will decide what said emergency is. And here's what's nice as well. Thought Eraser during the draw step will allow Paulo to decide, okay, let's take a look at your hand. 2 Tamiyos, Blink of an Eye, Wilderness Reclamation, Nexus of Fate, Search for Azcanta. Now I can decide actually what I want to line up this Dovin's Veto against and take one of these cards as well.
Exactly right. So possibly seeing a Tamiyo hit the graveyard, maybe, and then you have an answer for the other one, because Tamiyo obviously lets you either find a card in your library or bring a card back from the graveyard. So could be an argument to get rid of both of those, but let's see what Paulo picks here.
I think Tamiyo is probably the best card that's going on. Well, I'll say this. Tamiyo's the most powerful card. You've got Wilderness Reclamation check. That card's essentially textless now because of Little T. Blink of an Eye is, in my opinion, a mere annoyance because it delays things, but it doesn't solve things. And then Search for Azcanta, it kind of falls in that camp as well of, I mean, it's kind of annoying, but it's not the end of the world. So to see Paulo take a Tamiyo and probably counter the next one, or at least consider counting the next one, doesn't surprise me.
So now we're seeing from Autumn's side, what do they decide to do? We've got, basically, you're playing with an open hand against Paulo now because we can see everything that is available. So it's a bit of a tricky situation to be in. It kind of feels a little disheartening when you know that your opponent's got basically all the answers you could possibly want in their hands.
Look, playing against Paulo is tough enough.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we're talking about one of the most successful Magic players of all time, 2-time Pro Tour champion, all the accolades, which I'm sure you cannot Google and find out. You'll have a long time searching. But when Paulo has access to knowing what's in your hand as well, look, life's getting real tough here for our Simic Nexus player. Autumn, no slouch,
No,
but
not at
this
all.
is going to be really, really tough to come back from because Paulo has such an overwhelming advantage with these two Planeswalkers.
This is an uphill battle, and we saw the blink there being kicked, allowing Autumn to draw a card and send back the Search for his Cancer, which may be very close to flipping. Drawing now 2 Basilica Bellhaunts off the top. We're going to see this come into play, discard 2 cards, and gain some life for PBDDR.
I like Basilica Bellhaunt here. You know, this isn't a huge game-changing play, but, you know, it just has, it's kind of like needling you. It's like a little paper cut.
Yeah.
You know, discard a card. I gain a little bit of life, which doesn't actually matter, but now I get to actually start pressuring you. Planeswalkers were pressuring Autumn in one way. Basilica Bellhaunt's going to do it in another way. Now Autumn has to make a real decision on, all right, what card do I have to discard? This is kind of constricting my resources even more. I'm already resource light, and Paulo is so far ahead that I don't want to be attacked this way either. It continues to be a very difficult game for Autumn to work themselves through.
Yeah, certainly an uphill battle. Discarding the blink of an eye, I believe.
It was a Nexus of Fate that went
Nexus of
to
Fate
the graveyard and then
shuffled,
back
right.
into the deck.
Yes. Nexus of Fate does not like to hang out in the graveyard. So Big T now just untapping lands, drawing cards, getting closer and closer to ultimating again. So Autumn's going to need to find something to deal with Big T, while Little T just sits there and, you know, does his Little T things. Oh, all those instants you like? No, you're not playing them now, sorry.
Paulo just playing a very patient game, not in a rush at all. Search for his Kanta. Okay, that resolves. I have a couple different ways to take care of that. You know, Little T can bounce it. Big T can tuck it away. Dovin's Veto's going to take care of Tameo finally, which is not too surprising if I'm Paulo here. Now I can start to get to work on the life total and keep increasing the loyalty on these Planeswalkers. The thing to note here from Paulo's play, which looks like he's going to keep Narset, not much of a surprise, and transform the Search. He's just being patient.
Yeah.
That's it. He's not rushing at all. He's using all of his resources to his advantage. Did he draw some bad cards at the early stages of this game? Absolutely. But he's continued to be patient. He does not panic. And slowly but surely, he will whittle away all of Autumn's resources. I assume get to the life total at some point.
Well, in this matchup, the life total really doesn't matter. It's all about who has the most cards and who has, you know, the time to sit there and just start chipping away at them. So, yeah, if Teferi does manage to resolve his ultimate, we are going to see some things explode, but Narset, part of the Veils, is going to hit the board now and start digging through the graveyard. Well, start digging through the library, finding a Thought Eraser and another Teferi.
Narset is emblematic of what this matchup is about. Narset's going to generate an advantage for Paulo by finding a couple different cards and stop Autumn from generating card advantage because Chemister's Insight and various cards that draw additional cards will not work. This matchup is entirely about card density, who has more resources to work with, and Paulo finding a Thought Eraser, being able to cast this, is going to cut those resources even more. And what makes things difficult, we've talked about how Paulo's drawn so many dead cards, the Cast Downs, the Cry of the Carnarium, the Kaya's Wrath, some of those, the Dispark that's in his hand, those cards have all been horrible. But he's gotten to see so many resources that he's able to overcome that. And then when you're Autumn, you're thinking, well, I haven't got to see as many cards as Paulo, so the cards that I did draw have to be good. Well, they haven't drawn as many, and the Wilderness Reclamation has been equally as bad.
I have a question to ask you.
I have an answer, I hope.
There's an Elder Spell on top of the library, and it was left there. Are we going to see Paulo blow up his own Planeswalkers to get Teferi past his ultimate?
Well, if the game continues that long, yes. I'm not sold that it will, because Paulo has such an overwhelming advantage, but Paulo can simply make the play of blow up my 3-mana Teferi. That's Teferi Time Raveler, Little T as we'll be calling it this weekend. That will put some more loyalty counters on to Teferi Hero of Dominaria. We can work towards the ultimate, and Paulo's actually got another Teferi Time Raveler to play to be able to keep that 3-mana Planeswalker on the battlefield. So Paulo can, I guess we call it spin the basketball on his finger a little bit here. Take a leisurely stroll because he's so far ahead at this stage of things.
So we will see Wilderness Reclamation resolve. It is on the board, but it still can't do anything yet for... Oh no, wait, it's not going to stay on the board because there's a Despark in Paulo's hand, which he's now considering getting rid of. Yep, there we go. So Wilderness Reclamation, you were here for all of 2 seconds until you were Desparked.
Despark actually finally being good in this game. Despark's an interesting card in this particular format because it doesn't handle Little Teferi or
here
Narset.
It comes. Here it comes.
Elder
We're
Spell
blowing up our own Planeswalkers! Woohoo!
Yes, we are.
Oh, but this doesn't leave him vulnerable. So they would have been a consideration to maybe wait a turn if the Wilderness Reclamation hadn't come down, just because then you can start playing instants. But, you know, we're going to start blowing things up now. Yes, yes, we are.
Yep.
So,
I mean, this is This is more or less all she wrote, as it were.
Yeah.
You know, little Teferi is going to come down to the battlefield. Big Teferi is going to come down to the battlefield and replace the smaller Teferi. So now it's all about vacuuming
Smaller
up the
big
permanents.
Teferi. Wow.
Yeah.
We're going to need to find like multiple names for all these Teferis that we're going to be seeing this weekend.
We are going to start vacuuming up permanents is what we're going to do.
Oh yeah. What do we go for first here? Blast Zone? Yeah, sure.
Roll
why
a
not
die,
Blast
flip a
Zone?
coin. Blast Zone's not bad. When you have such an overwhelming advantage, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter too much right now. Paulo is just so far ahead in this game, picking up another copy of Narset too. Life is
Yeah,
good.
using little Teferi to minus himself, draw a card, and then using the emblem to destroy another permanent on Autumn's side of the board. So, woo, this is a very tricky position, or very unfortunate position to be in. Just stumbling on lands in the beginning, not able to execute your game plan at all because of little Teferi, really putting the brakes on for Autumn Burchett.
Well, it was that fumbling and stumbling in the early stages of the game that was very difficult for Autumn to overcome. Just the inability to find 4 mana to start casting Chemister's Insight or Tamiel really kind of did things in for Burchett, unfortunately. You know, when you get to this stage of the game where Teferi's got an emblem and you've got Narset, Teferi on the battlefield, there's really no coming back. If you're an Esper Control player all weekend here, Alias, this is what you want to see.
Oh yeah.
The Basilica Bellhaunts, okay, sure. But the 3 little Planeswalkers in the right-hand side of the screen, that's the goal all weekend long. You get that means you are winning.
Oh yeah. And these Basilica Bellhorns, you know, just chipping away at the life total. We will probably see a win here by killing the life total of Autumn Burchett instead of just the lands going away. But yeah, that was a bit of a beating there by those Planeswalkers for sure.
PVDDR making it look good, game number 1, able to get Teferi on the battlefield. Now, here's a nice thing if you're PV. Now you get to go, all right, whew, I won game 1. Now I get to get all these horrible cards out of my deck. So cast down,
all the cast
get
downs,
out
all of the cries, out you go, out you go.
Kai's Wraths, those are going to go. So the sideboarding here is very easy. It's very predictable of what's going to happen here. Now, sometimes we do see Simic Nexus decks bring in creatures. We've seen that in the past, but these players are working with open deck lists, so Paulo knows that's not a thing to worry about. So hey, what's up, Duress? What's going on? Ixalan's Binding, potentially the Elder Spell, potentially Command the Dreadhorde, Dovin's Veto. Let's get all of these awesome reactive cards in. Let's get these horrible removal spells out. And this makes things even more difficult. That's why I'm curious about the selection here for Autumn, is are they prepared for Esper Control when they're able to do this, get these bad cards out and get good cards in for games 2 and potentially game 3?
It's like 2 completely different deck lists when you see the Esper players' sideboards. Like, oh, cool, I have all this, so I'm going to bring it all in, and all that can go out. So.
Well, also, some of the thought process with the deck selection here for Autumn was this. You've got so many bad cards game 1 Esper Control, and I know you're going to be popular, that, hey, the first game, that's on the house. I get that one, especially if you don't draw Teferi Time Raveler. That's a freebie for me, and then I'll figure out a way to win one of the 2 sideboarded games. That's a way to attack a tournament. Now, it backfires when you lose game 1 in this match when you go, oh, I got to get 2 sideboard games. I don't know about that. I don't know how I'm going to do that.
It's going to be a little bit of a yikes here for Autumn, unfortunately. Like we said, just not finding the lands needed to get their game plan going, because that deck wants to get through the library as quick as it can, find those key cards. Let's see if Autumn can pull out something here against Paulo, Vitor.
You said little yikes?
Little,
I'm gonna go big. I'm gonna go big yikes. I'm gonna go big yikes.
All right.
Like little T and big T. I'm gonna go big yikes.
You can be big yikes. I'll be little yikes.
Perfect.
For the weekend. How's that? Alrighty, kicking things off here, we have Duress, Dovin's Veto, and Teferi, along with some spells. This looks like a pretty decent hand, but we're not really too crazy about not having. Well, do we mind not having Shocklands? That's fine.
So it's a small thing about this hand that I like, is that Swamp allows for Isolated Chapel and both Drowned Catacombs to enter the battlefield untapped. So you're fine in that regard. Your colors look good. You'd love to have 3 mana Teferi instead of 5 mana Teferi, but Duress and Dovin's Veto for protection means that this is a pretty good start, and then the Elder Spell does a nice job of taking care of any resolved Planeswalker.
Feels bad. There's a feels bad. Look at Autumn's hand. It's so many lands, and there's 1 creature in there.
So
do you think Autumn was a little panicked, maybe?
No,
not at all.
I like this keep from Autumn a lot.
All
so
right.
here's the reason I like this keep. In a matchup like this, it's all about lands, right? Think about how long that first game went.
Yeah, true.
It went forever. There's not going to be a short game here. Neither player can really pressure each other. So Autumn keeping a hand that says, you know what, I can play all my spells this game, thankfully. And now Searcher's Kanta comes rolling off the top of the deck, and as we can see with Paulo's hand, there is no answer for that powerful legendary enchantment. So I think life is good right now for Autumn Burchett.
All right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Paulo removed all of his removal spells.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so this Thorn Lieutenant might hang around for a little while.
This Thorn Lieutenant should get to hang out for a little bit, get in some points of damage. I don't think this is going to be Thorn Lieutenant, game's over, deal 20 points of damage Thorn Lieutenant, but this Thorn Lieutenant contorts the way that Paulo has to play the game a little bit, which is all you can ask for.
So the op being fired off now. Paulo contemplating, do I counter this? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna counter this op. I don't want you having any more cards, Autumn Burchett. You can hang out with those lands, and we will see what Searcher's Kanta can find. Oh, Narset part of Veils. That's not too shabby.
So Narset's nice. We're going to see Thorn Lieutenant come in here for 2 points of damage. I presume Narset post-combat minus and find, ideally, another card. No guarantee, obviously, but you're hoping, if you're Autumn, that you do.
Please don't whiff, Narset. No whiffing. Ooh, Nissa, who shakes the world, found out of the library. And, well, we have an answer for it. We actually have 3 answers for the Nissa, though, in the Elder Spells and Dovin's Veto. So Autumn's going to have to be careful.
Paulo's draw step was phenomenal because this allows Paulo to play the Elder Spell plus Dovin's Veto, the Nissa who shakes the world.
Oof.
So this is actually very, very good for Paulo.
This is a... Yeah, this is going to be...
I can see.
This is going to be a little painful here. This Nissa is probably getting Dovin's vetoed. I mean, there's no reason not to, correct?
There's no reason not to, but because of Autumn's draw step, we might see a different 5-mana play here in Biogenic Ooze. First things first, 2 points of damage. That's the easy part.
Yeah.
Now the tricky part is which 5-mana spell do you play?
So
which I think it's Biogenic Ooze.
Yeah, I think it's the Ooze, yeah, because you can't counter that.
Well, because it's you don't know about the Dovin's Veto 1, but 2, if Nissa who shakes the world was going to be played, it was going to be played pre-combat to be able to actually use the plus and get the attack in. So that play's pretty obvious upon hindsight. Now Biogenic Ooze is on the battlefield, and Teferi's got some real work to do.
Teferi going to draw a card, untap 2 lands at the end step, keeping up that Elder Spell, keeping up the Dovin's Veto. And Searcher's Kanta is going to find more goodies in Autumn Burchett's deck. Let's see what we get.
Autumn has done a really nice job of kind of doing something we see in Magic called bringing in a transformational sideboard. Again, players are working with open deck lists here, and you saw when Paulo was sideboarding that he brought out all of his Kai's Wraths and much of his removal and all the other stuff and saying, you know what, I think I can beat these creatures that you're probably bringing in. So that's exactly what is not happening right now if you're Paulo. Paulo is actually struggling to beat these creatures that were coming in. There is a nice thing with open deck list, right, where your opponent, in this instance Paulo, sees Autumn's sideboard and says, well, you're probably going to bring in creatures. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're trying to trick me. So now Paulo has to play a guessing game that Autumn has control over, which is nice. So it wouldn't surprise me, I'll say this, to see Autumn maybe go for game 3 if we get there. You know what? I'm boarding all these creatures out, and you've got all this useless creature removal again.
Ooh, look at all these Uzis.
Yeah.
There's no Wraths anymore, correct?
There are no Kai's Wraths. Paulo's going to concede the game right now. Look at Paulo's hand as we close that game. 2 copies of the other spell, Dovin's Veto, losing to creatures. Exactly that. So now what's interesting is if you're Paulo, and we get to watch this right now, Paulo gets so Paulo gets to look at Kaya's Wrath, he gets to look at Oath of Kaya, he gets to look at all these different things and say, okay, do I split the difference? Do I try to hedge now? Do I want more creature removal? Let's focus just on Kaya's Wrath right now. Do you want all 3? Do you just want 2? Do you just want 1? How many of that effect do you want? Because you just lost to creatures that Kaya's Wrath would have easily taken care of. How many Elder Spells do you want after sideboard? There aren't a ton of Planeswalkers in this deck, but there are enough that the Elder Spell should be in your deck. But we just saw what happened where he ended the game with 2 copies of the Elder Spell, and that card, when it's in your hand and doesn't do anything, is horrible.
Is there any consideration for Autumn to just go, all right, whatever I had in the first deck or in the first game, let me go back to that. Keep Paulo guessing.
So Paulo has to keep guessing, but now Autumn has to do a little bit of guessing too, because Autumn might be thinking, well, here goes Paulo. He's taking a while to sideboard, so maybe he's bringing back in the mass removal. But Autumn gets to kind of control the narrative, which is really fun about this, because it makes Paulo react. And sometimes it's nice to make a great player react, and maybe, just maybe, even though Paulo is one of the best to ever do it, he guesses wrong and you get to take advantage, which is what happened in that last game.
All right, so we are into match number 3, game number 3. Game number 3 in this match against Autumn Burchett and Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa. So let's get things going here. In the opening hands, we got Biogenic Ooze, Negate, and Nissa, who shakes the world for Autumn. And we've got Dovin's Nopes and 2 Thoughty Rages and Teferi and Narset and Teferi. Yeah, that's a hand.
Paulo's opening hand is very interesting. His lands are very slow, with Drowned Catacombs and Glacial Fortress entering the battlefield tapped. So that means his Thought Eraser, which he would have preferred to cast on turn 2, was actually played on turn number 3, and it got countered by Negate. Now Paulo's missing land drops, and he's got to figure out which 2-mana spell he wants to play between Thought Eraser and Searcherous Kanta. I think either one is going to get countered by this Spell Pierce.
Definitely. Why not? Spell Pierce gets increasingly worse the longer the game goes, so let's fire it off now. Prevent any information from my hand getting to Paulo, and let's keep him guessing.
So if you take a look at Paulo's hand, let's ignore the fact that he is having mana issues right now as best we can. I want to take a look at Autumn's hand as well. Autumn has left these creatures in, 2 copies of Biogenic Ooze and Nissa Who Shakes the World. Here comes the predictable Spell Pierce on the Thought Eraser. Paulo's hand right now does not do a very good job of answering Biogenic Ooze, and this is going to be a bit of a problem. If you're Autumn, you're kind of hoping that Paulo has some difficulty this turn, and he did.
Still no land, but no answer to this Thought Erasure. It's going to get to take one of the Biogenic Oozes or Nissa Who Shakes the World. Nissa might be the pick here.
Well, here's what we know.
Or is Biogenic Ooze more of a threat?
I think that taking Nissa is appropriate, but here's what we know. Biogenic Ooze is going to resolve, and you take a look at Paulo's hand, and he has no clean way to deal with it. So you're going to get to do exactly what you did in the last game, which is present an aggressive clock. Biogenic Ooze, just one, can win the game by itself, given its text and ability to create more oozes, and these oozes get bigger over time. So if you're Paulo, as he drew another copy of Dispark, okay, sure, you can use that.
Right. Can get rid of one of the 3/3 at least, the one that creates more of his little oozy friends.
And then the goal is to take care of the other original ooze over the course of this game, and then hopefully your deck coughs up some lands and the appropriate things to get out of this.
Yeah, so Paulo now begging for lands. Please, library, give me something so I can get into this game. He's got Narset and Teferi just waiting to help him out here, but he's in a bit of a pickle now.
Paulo's begging for a couple things. He needs Autumn to keep drawing lands, and he needs to draw lands that enter the battlefield untapped. Glacial Fortress is a 3rd land, but it's going to enter the battlefield tapped, which means he can't play Teferi Time Raveler. And that's the kind of hiccup that Autumn needed, because now Autumn can generate more oozes, and this is probably too much to overcome. And if the Nexus of Fate, the Nexus of Fate is a perfect draw. Perfect draw, and that is it.
That's it. Paulo failing to find the extra land to help him out.
That is huge. That is absolutely huge. I know we're going to analyze that game a little bit afterward, but that is absolutely a huge win for Autumn.
It is indeed. We're going to throw it to a quick commercial break when we will be back with more analysis.
I'm Alexander Hain. I'm from Canada.